Hey, welcome to the 174th episode of Just Shoot It, a podcast about filmmaking, screenwriting, and directing. I'm Matt Enlow.
And I'm Warren Kaplan, and today we've got our live show. We are super excited. We might say this every time, but I think this was the best live show we've had so far.
They keep getting better.
And because it was the live show and patrons got in for free, we magically got a bunch of new patrons.
Look at that. Our plan worked. All right, so here we go. We're going to shout out a ton of people who all helped make the show possible, starting with...
Thanks to Alex Schwartz,
Tim Johnson,
Kyle Hamna,
Sophie Niesenbaum,
the folks at Making Movies is Hard.
What up, Ulrich? Raul Guerrero,
Aunt Fallon,
Max Fogno,
Jonathan Kirk,
Glenn,
and Camry Fox.
Hey, thanks everybody.
Our listeners have some pretty cool names, right?
Yeah, pretty excellent.
Someone named Ant. Is that short for Anthony?
Yeah, I wonder.
Camry Fox. How cool is that?
That's a good one.
Anyway, thank you everyone for being a patron. We love the support.
Yeah, this is a super fun episode. Indie producers Liz Cardenas, Jana Winternitz, and Mary Pat Bentel are an awesome panel. They represent
like an awesome cross-section of producers.
Exactly, yeah. So we've got people who are a little more indie, a little more seasoned, coming at it from the digital realm. There's all sorts of people happening.
But they've all produced awesome movies and even a little bit of TV. And we just had this awesome conversation with them, and I felt like the whole event was just so fun. Everyone stayed so late.
Good vibes, man.
The venue was awesome. Rita House. Thank you, Rita House and Sarah Moss there. We had sponsors. Just like kind of just a overall good experience, and we're going to do it again. We're going for a Halloween show.
Yeah.
Trying to get a bunch of genre filmmakers on, and it will be cool.
Yeah, it was such a good time that we thought, we should just get the ball rolling immediately so that people have a little bit more time to plan. We have a little bit more time to get the word out. And so we're looking at a late October genre filmmaker Halloween theme.
Yeah, and if you want to get in for free, become a patron, patreon.com/justshootitpod, or don't.
Or did I tell you? So we had this awesome panel. Everybody was hanging out afterwards. We met this awesome guy. Our friend Nick, he was like, hey, I'd love to PA for you. This last weekend we shot together, and he's already got a new job from it. Because of how awesome he was.
What's the part of the story you're leaving out is you saying to him, we're never really in a position to recommend PAs to get hired as directors. It's usually like more producer, coordinator thing. And then, of course, you got him hired like 2 days later.
Like immediately. Yeah. And he killed it. So it was really nice. I feel like we have an awesome track record of when we get to know listeners, like Andy Young, killing it. They get scooped up so fast.
I don't know a more humble way to say this, but if you've gotten to the level where you're listening to our podcast regularly, you clearly are invested in listening to the nitty gritty of how filmmaking is
You're taking
done.
Things seriously.
Yeah, you're interested enough to spend an hour and a half once a week listening to us drone on about this stuff.
Otherwise, it would be boring. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I that's why I think most of our listeners, at least our regular listeners, would probably be pretty good crew members.
Well, so far, making us proud, making us look good. So that's the sort of stuff that happens at a Just Shoot It live show.
Yeah, let's stop wasting your time. Let's get into the show.
Let's get to it. Oh, and also before we go, we did a great Q&A session afterwards as well. That'll be a bonus episode in a couple days.
Before we get to the rest of our show, we wanted to talk to Zach Lipovsky for a second. He's a filmmaker that created an app called Shot Lister, and he's with us right now. And we're going to talk a little bit about the app. One of the cool things about it is it lets you color code your shots throughout the day as you're shooting, red or green, to indicate what you've already finished and kind of give you a bird's eye view of the project. Can you tell us a little bit more about the color coding and why you think it's a helpful feature?
Yeah, I mean, basically when you build your shot list, you can then build sort of a shooting schedule where you put in all the shots you want to get in the order and how long you estimate each one's going to take. And hopefully that adds up to 12 hours if you're doing a 12-hour day or whatever. And then when you're actually shooting, it goes into something called live mode, where it knows what time it is. It knows how many shots you've actually done already, and it can add up for you all the shots that are left and say, geez, there's about 45 minutes more shots here than you have time to do, and it tells you you're 45 minutes behind. And when that's the case, the whole app glows red, and the crew can see that when it's in your hand. And
does it start beeping?
It doesn't beep. We've definitely been requested, can it glow yellow when we're just a little bit behind? Does it have to really go red? And often, 90% of the time it's glowing red. If anyone's been on set, they know.
Yeah. Is there like a shock collar accessory that you guys sell in case it's in the red for too long?
We've had a lot of requests for that, yeah, but unfortunately, PETA hasn't let us do that. But people start knowing. They say, "Are we in the green? Are we in the red?" And it can be really helpful because you can then readjust all the shots, and all your estimates based on how things have changed, and then get it back on schedule. So you can move the important stuff, up in the shot list, and maybe get rid of or combine shots that you actually realize you don't need, because often when you're shooting a scene, you realize you don't need that coverage, or a second unit can get those close-ups later. And then you can get the schedule back to green. Basically, usually you do that at lunch when you're in a mad panic. And then sync it with the whole crew and show them the new plan. So the color coding ends up being really helpful for that.
I have an idea for a feature. It's called time decoy mode, and it just always basically puts you half an hour behind so that you hopefully finish on time.
Well, you definitely don't want to let the crew know that you're an hour ahead of schedule, because then they all start relaxing.
That's really why you need the yellow mode. It's not for red. It's for when you're like green-ish, basically.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a healthy energy that comes from being in the red. It really kicks your butt. You don't want to be too calm.
That's awesome. I wanted to get it, but I can't afford it at this point. I was just wondering, is there like some free way that I could get it?
Yes. For any people out there, we're actually going to give away the app to anyone who emails justshootitpod@shotlister.com. We're giving away 50 codes a month, every month, forever. So if you need a free copy, just email justshootitpod@shotlister.com and we'll send you one.
So every month forever.
Yeah, as long as this podcast is listenable by human beings.
Well, that's arguable at this point anyways.
And Zach, what should listeners that want a free copy of Shotlister write to you in that email? Just a blank email?
They could put what platform they want, because we have Mac OS, iOS, Android. So let us know which one of those you want. And then, assuming we haven't given away 50 that month, we'll send you a free code. But then you can always email the month after that.
Awesome. Well, cool. Thanks so much. We are excited to check it out. And to our listeners, if you do get a free copy of it, please email us at justshootitpod@gmail.com and let us know what you think. And if you have any feature recommendations, let me know, and I will tell you how cool I think they are.
Yeah.
If you are listening to this podcast, even months from now, even years from now, email justshootitpod@shotlister.com for your free copy of Shotlister.
Okay, enjoy the show. And today we have an awesome panel. Let's start on the end. We got Liz Cardenas. She's a 2019 Independent Spirit Award nominee and has been a producer on 8 feature films. Her recent credits include Augustine Frizzell's Never Goin Back, which was at Sundance, A Ghost Story, also at Sundance.
Augustine, previous guest.
Yeah, previous guest. She also just directed the pilot of Euphoria, which is like one of my favorite new shows. Both those movies were released by A24, and they received a ton of awards. She considers Texas her home base, where she was raised by her Hispanic father, who grew up in Mexico City, and her Irish-American mother, who grew up in Irish America.
Next, we've got Jana Winternitz. Hello, everybody. Jana grew up on a farm with 7 VHSs in the house.
This is videos or players?
This is the videos.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah,
Yes.
like the tape decks.
The
so
tape.
so
yeah.
you could like copy.
So I've only seen 7 VHS.
VHSs, not VCRs. I
Yeah.
thought you guys were like good at like pirating TV.
It's like you start
I
watching
didn't grow
Dr.
up watching
Dolittle.
movies, which is
Sure,
funny why I'm here.
Wait, well, hold on. Just to go off book immediately. What were the 7 movies that you owned?
There was, let's see if I can remember it. There was a Tom Hanks 3-pack. I think I had Splash,
Sure.
Big, and The Man with One Red Shoe. Mm-hmm. I had some animal films in there. I think there was a Milo and Otis.
Sure, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think I had Anne of Green Gables.
Sure.
You get the idea.
So, yeah,
yeah.
greatest
The
hits,
classics.
greatest hits.
Yeah. Yeah.
McDonald's would sell VHS tapes for a while. So I had Dances
Did
with
they?
Wolves because of McDonald's.
I had Dances with Wolves, but couldn't watch it. That was in the other bin.
There you go. Yeah. Gotcha. Well, besides having 7 movies, she also produced her first feature, You Friends, while still attending undergrad at Chapman, which is pretty awesome. She went on to serve as a creative exec over at Maker Studios, where she met our friend Mike Gallagher, who's right there. What up? And made internet famous The Thinning, New World Order, and also Funny Story. It's available on VOD. Get it now, guys. And also 70 other projects, including commercials, music videos, short films, a ton of work, basically.
Finally, we have Mary Pat Bentel. Mary Pat is her first name, in case you're wondering. She's an LA-based independent film producer known for Amateur Night starring Jason Biggs, The Lies starring Josh Leonard and Jess Wexler, The Midnight Swim, which was directed by our past multi-guest,
Including
Sarah
The Live
Adina
Show.
Smith,
Yeah.
who just directed the pilot for Hannah at Amazon. And she also produced Animals starring David D. and Austin Found starring Linda Cardellini and Skeet Ulrich. Mary Pat also produced This Close for the Sundance Channel, which stars and created Shoshana Stern, who was a deaf actress that I worked with on my movie, The Hammer.
Small world.
Still available on iTunes.
Round of applause one more time for our panel. All right. Awesome. So we're so excited to have you 3 here. You're all 3 producers, right? But I think everyone in this room knows that being a producer is kind of a different job for every single project in a certain sense, right? So,
Right. Like if someone says they're an associate producer, you pretty much don't think they worked on
ignore
the
'em.
movie, right?
Yeah.
Co-producer,
Samesies.
okay.
Kidding.
so 3 capital P producers then, huh?
Right, but the producer credit is like the thing, right? Like the producer has the producer credit.
The movie wouldn't exist without the capital P producer. That's how I like to see it. It's you generate the project. You see it through.
From beginning to end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the other interesting thing about the 3 of you is that I feel like you all kind of represent a different style of or type of movie, right? So Mary Pat, like I said before, you're like a little more maybe talent oriented, right? Like there's some fancy names in there. No, you don't. Think so?
I mean, I think I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of established casts.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that I'm out seeking that thing. I focus mostly on drama, comedy, and dramedy. Like that's really, it's more like a genre thing for me, and like whatever speaks to me.
Interesting.
At different points in my life, but yeah, I guess I've worked with a few celebrities.
A few fancy people. You're Jason Biggs and Linda Cardellini's of the world.
And Marissa Tomei.
Yeah, Marissa Tomei, sure.
And Tomei, I could keep going.
Yeah,
No,
of course.
I don't-
Exactly. So,
They're all
but
just
so
people-
more
people.
traditional talent, I guess, is what I'm saying. Whereas,
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Jana, you kind of came in at it from a more digital perspective, right? Like a lot of quote unquote influencers, right? A lot of like digital homegrown people that kind of grew up into bigger and better things or different, more traditional things, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, I went kind of the traditional route as far as I went to film school. I went to Chapman University. But the time that I entered the business is always changing. And that moment in time, that's what was getting funded. So you kind of assess where the business is at and you try and get your movie made however you can. So there we are.
And then Liz, I would call you maybe a little more traditional, like indie, right? Like I think you look at, especially like A Ghost Story or
Never Going Back.
Going Back. Pardon me. Thank you. Those are both kind of like classic festival sort of plays, basically.
Yeah, I think with me, I started making films, and then I specifically sought out like really talented directors and filmmakers who were having films at Sundance and
Good thing
South
you're
by,
here.
and wanted to work with them and like learn from them. And so a lot of the relationships have been based from that, like from both the film festival world and then specifically looking at filmmakers that I could work with and like learn from.
Cool. Well, so Mary Pat, what's like on that note, what excites you about a project that makes you want to produce it? Like what are some things?
I mean, I think it always comes down to the material and just having like a visceral reaction upon reading it for the first time. and then I'm often sucked in by the director. And often it's the same. I work with a lot of writer-directors. That's really been my jam before I moved into television, which I've been doing for the last 2 years. That and having a baby. And now I'm kind of resurfacing and reevaluating. But I think for me, it's just I want to see myself, some form of myself in the stuff that I produce. And it can be like a tiny sliver, but it's just, I think that we're at a time where everyone's like focused on diversity and representation, and all of those things obviously speak to me, but there is a part of me that at the end of the day, when I turn on a TV show or a movie, I just want to see some piece of my life reflected in some way. And so that's sort of how I base my decisions on the projects I'm working on. And then I sit down with the director, and if I love him or her, then I'm usually pretty hooked. I have to believe that they have like the talent and the vision, and very much like Liz, like it's so imperative that they are going to teach me something. Because at this point, to be honest, you can produce in your sleep. So the thing that gets you like out of bed in the morning, gets you excited about doing something is the idea of like the creative magic that will happen in the making of a movie, right? So it really just comes down to like the script, and is it something I'm gonna be excited that I left behind? And is the director someone who I want to go into battle with?
So have you had projects where you absolutely loved the material and the director
Was an
bored
asshole?
you?
100%.
And you make those or you don't make those?
Made a few.
What about you two?
I have actually politely stepped off a couple movies because you get a little bit down the line and you realize that you're trying to make different movies, and you have to trust your gut in those situations. It's only going to get further down the line as you go. So, and signing on to make a movie, you are committing to multiple years of your life, protecting, shepherding this project and this group of people to make something with a singular vision. So you really have to kind of all be on the same page from day one. I think that's super important. But for me, picking a project, I try and think like 5-10 years ahead, and it kind of ask myself that question, am I going to regret not making this? That's how I kind of make my decisions.
And I just want to follow up on that idea of you feeling like you want to make a different movie than the director. Does that also apply to like a writer-director? Like does that happen where both the script and the way it's being made are totally different than what you expected?
Generally not. With writer-directors, I'll be pretty hands-on from like day one, even from like the inception of the idea, and kind of walk the script along. So I'll be pretty dialed in with that. But this is more if I'm coming onto a project that is either just a script or a writer-director that I'm just now meeting. So
Cool.
Let's flip the script a little bit. What makes the three of you like a director? Like, why do you want to continue to work with people? Because all three of you, I think, have like great relationships with the directors that you like to work with. Liz, let's start with you.
I think like you were saying, like the fact that they have a vision, you want them definitely to have an opinion and be like, they really see the world, but you also want them to be like collaborative. It's like so important that when you were talking about like the magic that gets created in movie making, that's one of the reasons why I do it. It's like I love that, and you would never be able to have a film turn out the way it did if not everyone kind of contributed. And so, again, we talked about the fact that there's different types of producers. I think all of us consider ourselves creative producers, which means we handle logistical things, but we're also shepherding projects creatively. And so the reason we're doing this is because we're investing our heart, our soul, our sweat and tears and everything. And so when you have that collaborative spirit with the writer-director and that you're all kind of as a team, that's what I really enjoy, and that's what I really respond to with like the other like directors and writers that I'm working with.
And just to follow up though, early on when you're first kind of making that assessment of whether or not you want to be collaborating with a person, what are some of those early things, right? Like obviously when you're in the trenches, when things are clicking, right? But like when you're first in that dating phase, right? Like what are early indicators where you're like, oh, this is going to work?
Initial conversations over the script. I think that's like a first thing. You can easily feel right away when you're like talking openly about the script, if you instantly get like resistance, or if it's like, it's not that they have to be like, oh yeah, I want to change it, I'll change everything. No, you want them to have their opinions and their challenges, but you can definitely get a sense of the openness of like, oh, I never thought about that, or that's interesting. Let's discuss it, or let's think about it. It's being more open, positive energy, openness, that type of thing. Initially, from like you read the script and then you start discussing it.
Right, but so open, but not a pushover. Like you don't want them to say, because I see this in commercials all the time, because the directors almost never write the script, where the director is just like, I'll do whatever you want me to do. You don't like this wardrobe? I don't like it either. Like, let's change it.
And that's a scary thing for a producer to be, involved with, because that's not what you want. And I think I've been really fortunate, when I was mentioning like the idea of like seeking out certain filmmakers and going to film festivals, and you were talking about the whole indie vibe or indie world. It's like I haven't worked with any writer directors that I didn't like, and
Lucky
not only
you.
that, I know, and I'm sure that will happen. But I've worked with a lot of friends, like where I was like, again, with Augustine Frizzell, we were both actresses and filmmakers. We produced each other's short films. Then I produced her feature. A short film that I produced that's playing Outfest this week, the writer-director produced my short film. Like, it's been very collaborative, as just like, I like to consider myself like a storyteller. And so I've worked with other like writer, director, actors, producers. Like, in the indie film world, you're kind of doing everything. And then a lot of these writer directors I've started to work with have turned into my best friends. Like, I've just been really fortunate, that these relationships have cultivated like that.
Well, you spend a lot of time together too, making a movie. You're really getting into the trenches with somebody. So yeah, for me, picking somebody, it's that trust, that openness to collaborate, because it really is a collaborative process. And somebody, that's you want to spend time with, that they're a leader and not like a dictator. You have to have that energy that's going forward. But again, it's very collaborative. So
Well, let me ask you this. Maybe Mary Pat, you can answer first. Have you ever worked with like a writer-director, you feel like you had this great experience together, and then they go on to make their next movie and they don't bring it to you to produce? Does that make you bummed?
Yeah, it does, and it has happened. It's in my experience, it's just been a timing thing. I'm not going to be specific about it, but a film that I made not too long ago, another director that I had previously worked with literally started production on their movie the exact same day. So it was just a timing thing, and I can kind of chalk up most of it to timing. I mean, I'm embarrassed to admit that I have exactly one friend that doesn't work in film and TV, and that's my husband.
Oh man!
And the minute I met him, I was like, I need to fucking marry you because you don't do this. Or we're gonna work.
I had the opposite thing. So.
I know, you really do. It's awesome. Which is great. I mean, I dated a ton. I mean, let's not lose time in talking about my 20s. It's a very dark time.
No, I'm laughing because I worked with my ex, and now we're not together. So there's all spectrums
you
of
get
this.
the whole gamut, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I think that, what I look for in a director now is not what I looked for years ago. Like,
How has it changed?
it's evolved into double checking that they don't have an ego, because I think a lot of the time, especially in the courtship phase, I think people are really good at selling themselves. You have to be. That's how you get anywhere in this business, right? I'm terrible at it, but everyone around me is very good at it, and so I just hang in there. But I think that it's, you don't really know who you're getting into bed with until you're in bed. And even I remember day one of a movie with someone I had made another movie with, and I saw a totally different side, and I was like,
that's
oh
interesting.
shit, this is going to be so much fun. Let's do another 19 days of this.
Were there any factors that changed? Like, what brought the
I
the
think
beast out?
there had been time between movies, and fear had set in, and it's tough because I really think that you have to be like a very nurturing person as a producer. It's just like you either have the ability to do it or you don't. I think there are people who are just naturally in it to support someone's vision and to creatively challenge them, and sometimes people think they're ready for that, but they're not. And there can be personality clashes over, for me, I'm always excited when I'm working with a director who wants to surround himself or herself with people who have more experience and aren't afraid of that, actually welcome that, want that challenge, want to be pushed to the next level. And I think, it's, so I would say loyalty is important to me as I think about, especially since I've been developing a lot more television, just like attaching myself to future projects, because if I'm going to bring my experience to your inexperience, we're dancing. And if that's not the agreement that we're both coming to, then I don't know what I'm saying yes for.
Oh, that makes me, this is totally off script also, but I think a lot of times when people are pitching movies and TV shows, they bring it to like some agent or some producer, and they're like, oh yeah, well I have these 3 other producers attached. And everyone tells them like, oh, that's a bad thing. Like an agent will be like, well, can you get rid of these 2 producers because we got this bigger producer? Like, is that a thing that you've experienced also? Like, can you talk about? Is it bad to have a lot of producers on your project? I guess.
I mean, I think there's such a thing as being top heavy for sure. I'm certainly cognizant of it when I'm packaging stuff, and it's very seldom that I come to a project that already has people attached at that level, just because I have a certain way of doing things, and I do know to investors that seeing 4 producer fees feels like cumbersome and maybe not necessary, and what did those people do? But, every once in a while there's something that was developed before you came on the scene, and I want to be respectful of the people's time, and certainly have a number of things where I've made friends on projects that were already attached as producers and consider them super close. So, I don't think it's, I just think in the business place, it's not necessarily like a great thing, and certainly agents will tell you all the time it's not. But I feel very fortunate that I'm kind of on the other side of it now, where I'm not the one who's being asked to get the fuck off the project,
Right.
But with anything, like with your budget, you want the money to go on screen. So I think we all come from a place of how do we make that happen? How do we save? How do we, consolidate? How do we just, put it all up?
And sometimes in the beginning, like if you're starting off as a filmmaker, you need someone to believe in you. So that's so important of getting that first producer to help you go forward. Because a lot of times, as early on as a writer-director, you're also kind of producing your own thing, and you need someone to come on board and help.
Yeah, that's something I just want to highlight very quickly, that I think that directors need to be aware of. You are producing your project until it gets to the start line, and even all the way to the end when you're delivering. Like, hang in there and stay with the people and finish it. But I think it's, I think there's this, misconception about what, like, everyone around me is supposed to be putting this together. It's like, no, actually, we're all in this together, and you benefit the most, so do some work,
Yeah.
Especially in independent film.
Well, I think there's this giant misconception I hear kind of new filmmakers always have. They're like, okay, well, we got this movie, we got this script, and I have this producer, and now we got this amazing casting director, so they're going to attach name talent to our project, and that's never how you attach
If only
talent.
it was that easy.
Yeah, and it's usually the director or some relationship and much more producing work from the director, who this actor is going to have to trust, that is required before you can attach people.
Yeah, it's still your baby. You know what I'm realizing just kind of in talking to the 3 of you is that producing is kind of a unique thing where there can be more than one. There's a lot of you. There can be. There's the potential for that. Talk a little bit more about the ways in which you've found yourself in that position and the ways that you like to collaborate, I guess, basically. I guess if there are other cooks in the kitchen, if there are other producers, right, like if you maybe come in a little bit later after things have been developed, or, there are other circumstances where other people have to be on board, how do you weather that storm, I guess is what I'm asking.
I mean, in my experience, I am generally starting the project, so it's who I'm bringing on, and I try and always bring on producers that supplement my skill set, so we try and not have overlap. So we try and be economical about that, but I haven't come on to a project with producers on
where there's too much overlap.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
I've done both. But it's I don't think that there's been overlap. Again, it just every project is so different. And so if you have a project that doesn't have very much money, it's time and resources. So then you have a few more people on board to help, get the film made, and you're kind of as a team of producers. But again, that's very indie film world. I'm working on a project right now that I'm on it, and we brought another producer on that I wanted, again, someone to help with this, but kind of in that mindset, that growth mindset of like, who's someone that has the same vision, but that brings a unique perspective to the table, and who has like maybe a different, like, that I could learn from, like, you know, that I looked at as being like above me, that like, so I've had it both ways where I've brought on producers or that to help, but then also brought on bigger producers that could help elevate the project.
I think the truth is that it takes a village.
Yeah.
And the instances where I've worked with other producers has mainly been in the arena of additional financing, and a few instances where it was like bringing in a producer who had a big name, who had a certain relationship that they were going to bring to the table that pushed the thing over, right? But I think it's like anything, you know, you just have to be honest about, like, I've gotten really good at saying, like, what do you care about? What are the things that you think are really important? And what will you be upset if you're not included on? Because I tend to, and it sounds like you guys are in the same position where it's like you're the lead producer on these films. So I always want to be respectful and say, like, if you care about casting, let's talk about you. Let me know. If you care about giving notes on the script, if you care about, and I'm coming out of television, so please mind, like, you know, the gap, this 2-year gap I've had, but I think it's just about making sure people feel taken care of. You know, and often, at least in the last, you know, indie movies, so often you're giving up a capital P to people who truly just brought in money, right. Even though they should take an EP, they really want to produce. Yes. So
even when we were putting together this panel, we like texted our like filmmaker friends, director friends, and be like, "Hey, what about this producer?" We looked him up on IMDb, and they're like, "Well, he's a producer, but he didn't really do it." Yeah.
God, I hope no one ever says that about me.
Yeah, so we brought those 3 people on.
You
I don't know
passed.
if they did enough homework.
They
well,
did.
so
You guys
speaking
are all
of
punked right now.
speaking
actually.
of financing, let's do a quick lightning round, starting with Liz. What's the minimum budget you would make a movie for?
I mean, honestly, I'm working right now on a short film that's got a decent sized budget for a short film, but the project is so unique. The director is so amazing. So I don't like to have boundaries. I don't like to put myself in a box.
$100,000? Would you make a movie for $100,000?
I mean, I have. Yeah.
We all have, yeah.
Now, are those days really tough? And like, am I still looking towards the future and like going up? Yes. But no, I don't like to put boundaries on stuff. But I mean, again, you need time or money, you know?
Right.
Because it has to be good.
My number's $3 million. No,
That's what we're looking for.
I mean, I think that.
But no, it's seriously $3 million.
Yeah, but I think it's $3 million. No, I don't. I think I agree. It's like you can't really. Every story deserves a different amount of money, and so you can't really pigeonhole yourself into like, I'm never going to do another $100,000 movie. It's like I said that to myself 5 years ago, and I'm overseeing 2 right now. Like, how did I get here? I don't know. Right. I fell for the director one more time.
Can you name us 2 elements that determine how much money a movie needs? Not the only 2, but just any 2.
I mean,
like if people here are like writing scripts, trying to get their movies made, what are the top 3 things they need to look at in terms of determining how much money they need to do a good job on it?
I think the scope of the story, right? Like, you know, you're not like kill the action sequences, and don't try to make it with a A++ star. I don't know. I mean, I think I hate even answering questions like that because it's like your story shouldn't be. You should never be thinking about budgets when you're starting a new process, right? Like when you're sitting down to write a story that's like burning up inside of you that you have to get onto the page. I hate the idea of you like stopping yourself from really
that's
singing.
The answer
yeah,
then, right?
The answer is the budget is whatever the budget needs to be. And
yeah, it is what the budget needs to be.
And you may not be able to direct that first one as a writer, but maybe. I mean,
And there are also different versions of every movie too. Like I'm working on a movie right now that there's a way to do it low, and there's a way to do it, you know, with music and with, you know, the whole scope of it, how it should be. So every project is specific and every project has different routes, and it's like they're all snowflakes. It's like, how do you make it versus not make it? So you have to kind of assess all the elements.
And I do, like, my philosophy is to encourage, if we're talking about like up and coming filmmakers, is to make a film, short film, feature, just like, again, just shoot it exactly what your podcast is called.
Get your hours
so
in,
if
yeah.
it means thinking about, I can shoot it at this one location and make it like, that really helps cut down the cost. There's a world where I believe in that. Like, yes, you should be creative when you're writing and not be thinking about certain things. But at the end of the day, if time is passing, and you want to make a film, go out and make it, then be cognizant
You do
of
have
that.
to be
and
boxed
get your
in,
friends
yeah.
together and go, we're going to make it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there is this kind of indie film mantra of like, write to your resources, you know?
For
Especially
your
if
first
it's your-
one, yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, show of hands, who here is thinking about making their first feature? Just so we know. Yeah.
Awesome.
So about half of you guys. So show me number of fingers. How many millions do you have raised right now? No? Okay. Hey, all right, I saw some numbers. There we go.
I don't know how to phrase this question, so the answer is short. But like, how do you, for first-time filmmakers, how do they raise money for their movie? Like, do you have any tips? Like, how have you guys financed first movie? Like, Augustine Frizzell made, right, Never Going Back.
Yeah,
that was her first movie.
That's a very interesting story, and when I tell it, people are like both fascinated and like, oh, that's really cool example of like filmmaking lessons. So we shot Never Going Back, a feature based on some money that we scrounged together, and then like a crowd funding
And she got
Kickstarter campaign.
I think she got a grant from the
And
state of Texas,
we
right?
did get a grant from the Austin Film Society, and we shot the feature, and we weren't happy with it. So we cut it to a short. It premiered at South by, and we reshot the entire feature. And the second time around when we shot the feature, we brought on more, I guess, more people, recast, and things were elevated, I guess you'd say. And again, that was still, we raised money in private equity, but again, through like people we knew in the film world and
with the firepower of a short that premiered at South by.
yes, and then also this is after a ghost story. So, David Lowery, her husband, successful filmmaker. I was a co-producer on A Ghost Story with his team, and so they were on board, the Never Going Back, so that really helped open certain doors and so forth. But the idea that we shot a feature and then cut it down to a short and reshot it shows like kind of perseverance, the dedication, the learning. But again, it was like the first one was a rush. Like we rushed to it and it didn't turn out as well as it should have, and completely learned from it. Like that's like a huge learning experience for both hers and myself. And then, like I said, the first one was like nothing, like $30-some thousand we made the feature on. The second one, still, we were nominated for the Independent Spirit Award for the John Cassavetes Award, which is a film under $500,000. So that shows you it still was a micro budget. But, again, it was just through the filmmaking contacts and resources that we had.
So there used to be this idea that you have to find like rich dentists to like give you
That
spare money.
helps.
Is that still something? Mary Pat, Jana, do you just start a multi-million-dollar influencer company? What's the best move?
I mean, in my experience, it's really been reach out to every single person you know that's ever made money doing whatever they made money doing. Plus, and I don't know if this...
Wait, and when you reach out to them, what do you say?
Give me money. No. I
Do
mean,
you say,
obviously...
I have an opportunity for you?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you have to put together a business plan and be like an adult about it. And certainly it helps to have, at minimum, have to have a short film, whether it's derivative of the feature or whether it's an original concept that shares a similar tone, just something that expresses to the investor, like, we're capable. We know what we're doing. Trust us. We're going to make you your money back. You have to, I mean, I'm not going to go through like, the 40 pages of a business plan, but, you can't ask for several $1 million without backing up with bios and a budget and schedule and a key team that people can go, oh my God, I do know the things that they've worked on. I believe that they're going to be able to push us over the line. The idea of like a strategy, and I guess I am going to go through all the 40 pages.
And you need those things even for a $100,000 movie.
That's
$50,000.
true.
Yeah.
You need that document
Or
no
all
matter
of-
what.
But are you taking that document to people within a first or second degree relationship, or are you taking
Yeah, and I think, and also what I was going to say is that, I also partner often with the indie film financing departments at the agencies, and they're very helpful for whatever reasons, whether they're just like front of mind or whether they represent the director or one of the lead actors, and kind of cobbling together with them like this list of people to hit, because there are only certain, there's only so many numbers, like there are only so many companies that are doing a certain level of movies.
Right.
So
how does that work? You like tell William Morris Endeavor, like, hey, we got this script, we got this director, we need money, and they send it out to money people? And it says a big WME on the cover?
If they care about it, yeah. I mean, they have to obviously love it and believe in it too, right? But I do think that agencies are in the business of serving clients, and there needs to be some connection for them, like to really be able to go into their bosses and say, I'm going to take the time that it takes to get this movie financed. Because the first question is like, okay, so who's this, who from WME is in it? The answer has to be insert actor here, right?
Right, George Clooney.
But then also certainly crowdfunding.
See,
Just
kidding.
And there's
It was a
lots
joke.
of grants out there. And then the other thing I think you should keep in mind when you're going this more like indie film route is think about who would be interested in this story. Because it's reaching out to obviously people people who care about you, certain people that have the means to invest some money, but then also who would want to see this story told? Like, think about that, because then those are the people that are going to give you money, not because, oh my gosh, I'm hoping to get this return on the investment. They're going to be doing it because I think this is a story that needs to be told. I want to see this out there.
Right.
But also for you first-time feature filmmakers, you can do it for a really low bar. Like, my first film premiered at Slamdance, and I've subsequently programmed for Slamdance, and I see first-time features all the time. And it's amazing what you can get away with if we care about your characters and we care about what they're doing. The technical proficiency doesn't have to be through the roof. And so you just have to do it. You have to really trust in your story and go for it. And you'd be so surprised with, your DP friend who needs their first feature credit, and your network of people who you're growing with, like who you can call upon to support you, not from a financial standpoint, but from a career standpoint, from a getting their
Resources,
hours
yeah.
in standpoint,
Emotional standpoint.
absolutely,
Totally.
the whole thing. But don't be burdened by reaching the $3 million mark on your first feature. You can do it for
Now, what if you have a friend that knows Julia Roberts' assistant or something? Does that help in any way? Like,
Show of hands. How much do you know?
do those connections get you places, or is that kind of not really a first feature type of avenue to take?
As a creative producer, whatever outlet, whatever avenue you can call upon, I would say,
Maybe another way to say it is, or ask it, is there, are there instances where maybe there are kind of favors that people can pull that are so big or out of that first feature league that you decide not to pull them? Do you know what I mean? Like, because we all know we only have so many times you can go to your rich uncle or ask Julia Roberts to be in your movie or whatever, right? So if you're making a $50,000 movie, a $100,000 movie, do you not call Julia Roberts in that circumstance?
I think the reality of that is if Julia Roberts is in your movie, it's a completely different movie.
Well, what if you just write some VO for her?
Great.
And then
Have her record it on her iPhone and email it to you.
Or do you know
and
Julia
she can
Roberts?
EP
I know
the
some other
film.
people.
I think it depends on the connection. Like, how strong is the connection if you use it? Is it like, I know that person, or is it they do have a friendship? And then two, I think it goes back to what you were talking about. Like, you have to have something to show for it. No one's going to do, like a big name is going to do a first-time feature without seeing anything that they've done before, whether it's a short film, a music video, something that that you can see that they've got talent and that they're going to be in good hands. They just want to feel like they're in good hands.
Awesome. I want to transition to talking about talent for a second, but before we do that, I want to point out that we have a gentleman in this front row that finances very high-budget independent films. So he randomly came to our podcast recording today, but you should talk to him after we record.
Wow, no pressure,
He
bro.
did Tolkien.
no pressure.
What was the other movie you did? Shape of Water.
I haven't
Never
heard of
of
Great
it.
film.
Yeah.
Well, cool. So on that
Thank
subject
you for
of
supporting
talent-
independent film.
Yes.
On the topic of talent, though, like how I think something that Matt and I have seen a lot lately is you can kind of attach like B-list talent to your movie, but not A-list. Does it, at that point, does it matter at all that you're attaching someone, or is it better to just like attach an amazing actor that's inexpensive?
I think it all comes down to whatever the budget is, to be honest. I think that there's still as many ceilings that have been broken through. Like the reality is there's still a little bit of a formula to the international sales piece of it. So even
like if you get a Jean-Claude Van Damme or Tony Danza or something, that
well,
might,
those guys are still they have
right,
a ton
that's
of
what I'm
value.
saying. They
yeah.
might make your movie a multi-million-dollar movie, even though in America they're not huge.
Yeah, I mean, I think to back up for a second, I think that you need to cast the right person for the movie for the right reasons, right? Like I think that's one of the biggest pitfalls when you start to put together your first movie, where your financiers are telling you that they want a certain, like there are 5 people that they're going to invest in. If they're all wrong for your movie, don't make the movie with those people. You're going to regret it. Like
But Jennifer Aniston has so many fans.
The amount of VFX
But
that
I
you would
think-
have to.
I think that's a really good point, though, because I've seen, like in programming on the flip side, I've seen films that have name talent and they're completely wrong for it and it's not going through. And they should have just done the movie with the people that, you know, they wanted to cast. It would have been a better movie. So, yeah, it's too
Yeah, the goal always has to be what is best for the film.
Yeah.
Because if it's not, it's never going to do well. People aren't going to respond to it, and that's ultimately what you want.
But could you say that what's best for the film is like a $2 million budget, which you get based off this
Well,
certain
again,
actor?
it's all depends on what the goal is, because if it's an independent filmmaker and they're wanting to show that they're talented and they're trying to sustain a career, it's not about making one movie. It's about trying to establish yourself as a talented storyteller so that you could have a career and a future. And in that case, you know, if the talent isn't right for it and the film doesn't do well, that doesn't really help you, even if it had a big budget.
Right. That's a great takeaway. I want to just ask Jana real quick. Is this your ride?
I want to hear more about your Tony Danza Jean-Claude Van Damme movie.
We're always putting out fires. I do say we're firefighters.
Yes. Oh my God, that is true.
Here we are.
No, but Jana, you obviously have a history of working with people who are giant celebrities online, right? Like influencer. You made a movie called Internet Famous, literally, just to describe.
I did,
what you
yes.
do.
It's a mockumentary kind of spoofing the YouTube culture, which
So
needed to happen.
I'm sure you've been in a situation where people are like, hey, you should cast this girl. She's a makeup vlogger. She has 8 million people that watch her stuff
As soon
every
as they
day.
start adding like stats of like, oh, this number of followers.
What's
that
your
could be
take
about
on that?
I think that there are people that use the platform of YouTube and social media because they are interested in, acting or being a personality, and they're using that as a means to kind of present themselves that way. And then there are other people who don't have an interest in film or television and are just doing it to do it. And I think navigating between those two is really important. So with all the films that I've cast with influencers, we've always auditioned them and we've taken the time to get to know them, and they are all interested in that path. So I think you can't just kind of stunt cast it. That's never going to work out. But if you can cast somebody in the same way, casting a name can help elevate your project, can help bring an audience to your project, can help market a project. Those are all valuable assets. But at the end of the day, if they're not right for it, it's going to sink the whole thing.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Internet Famous came out so long ago that like the idea of an influencer movie was still pretty new. Do you know what I mean? Like people hadn't
It was ahead of its
realized-
time, Matt,
Exactly.
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. But so you kind of had to convince people like, no, these people are famous and they are going to bring value in a different way.
Absolutely. We made a couple movies back to back that all kind of had influencers leading the films. And we kind of went from 3 different companies and made their first version of these movies. So we had to kind of, educate. We were consulting for another company at the time, explaining what this world is and how this works. So it was really, it was
So everyone stole your idea, is what we're saying.
basically. No.
But is it easier to get like a Logan Paul than it is to get like a Jason Biggs? Someone that already has this giant built-in marketing plan without you having to do anything. For some reason, I think there's this idea that influencers are easier to just buy than
Not necessarily,
celebrities.
though, because a lot of influencers are coming at their content from they are doing everything. So they're the EP, they're the creator, they're, the talent. And so bringing them into something that has this whole team of people behind it, a lot of people aren't comfortable with that. So making that transition is an art in and of itself, like having that trust with certain people. Because a lot of people don't want to relinquish anything. Because if you have complete creative control, why would you want to give that up? So that was a really interesting transition for a lot of people we've worked with, just kind of building that trust in those relationships and saying that this is a collaborative thing, and they wanted to work with us on it.
Right. Liz, how'd you get Casey Affleck for A Ghost Story?
Because of David's relationship with them. He worked with both Casey Affleck and Rooney Mara beforehand. And I think that the through line of what we've been talking about a lot is it's all about relationships. Whether it's the producer relationships, the relationships between the producer and the writer-directors, the relationships between talent, between agents. I really feel like this whole business is about relationships. And a lot of these don't happen tomorrow. It's like planting seeds that happen like in the future. And you just keep cultivating friendships, relationships, collaborations, and that's what leads to stuff in the future.
And Mary Pat, I want to ask you, if you're a first-time filmmaker, how important is it for you to have a relationship with agencies, like Hollywood agencies?
I mean, I'd love to. I think it's pretty important. I think that but to back up for a second, I would say
You were going to say...
we're all no. You don't know me. No, I would say we're all strangers until we're not, right? And I really think it just comes down to. Because I don't want you walking away being like, oh, I don't know anyone who knows Casey Affleck, and I don't know if I'm going to make my movie. Cause
Well, you know Liz.
Now you know Liz.
She'll hook you up.
Exactly. Plant the seed.
Yeah.
Go talk to Liz after.
It's just that easy. No, I think that I think it comes down to obviously the material has to be great because it just does. You should never make a movie that you don't believe in the script, and don't even start it at 90%. Like get it to 100, and then you can start talking about even trying to get it to cast. But I think that the script speaks for itself. I think a personal letter from the writer-director goes a long way. I think that's imperative.
Huge.
And I really think, as much as I love casting directors and I have great relationships with all of the best of the best, it still comes down to hustling. Like I'm gonna give a little piece of advice, like use the phone. It's like such a crazy, archaic idea, but you can ignore email after email. But when someone's calling your office, like look, I'm obviously shameless. I'll do whatever it takes to get somebody to read something, and I can point to like 12 actors that I got having zero relationship with their agents, but just and managers, and just like continuing to call, continuing to follow up, hitting them from other directions. Like yes, of course, if someone knows Julia Roberts' assistant and she like believes in this, I mean, sure, great. But like I think going to the source, these like gatekeepers, although most of them are just human beings who want to find good work for their clients, so like don't be afraid of them. What's the worst thing they could do? Like say no, slam down the phone, like go get over it. Like,
Everyone's looking for good material. Yeah.
People don't slam phones anymore, just so you know. It's like you're just like...
I'm aging myself. Yeah, I mean, I know it doesn't really ever happen like that. I mean, people are really respectful. Very seldom have I gotten like an angry pass. I mean, but I think that, you have to be patient. Like I think that's something that people, first time filmmakers are like, oh, it's all going to happen quickly. It's like, no, get comfortable. It's going to take a minute. It takes a really long time, especially for actors who are in demand, who know that they have the green light power to get through the stack of scripts that are sitting on their desk. Like, be patient and don't get discouraged if you get a pass. It doesn't mean it's like your material is shit and you should just like move home. No, like get over it. Come up with the next idea. The right person always says yes. And I look back at some offers we've made on movies in the past where I'm like, oh my God, that person would have been horrible. Like, what were we thinking? And you just have to just trust, like, the actor knows what they should do. And if they say no, it's for 1,000 reasons. And who cares what they are? But the person who says yes, that's the person who was supposed to be in your movie. Yeah. So it may take 6 months. It may take a year. It may take, scrounging up their cell phone. I mean, don't call them on their cell phones. Don't do it. It's bad advice. But everything short of that and like throwing a script over like their gated fence, like you really just have to kind of, and you know, I think that with
the pizza delivery, put it in a box.
There you go.
Is a better move.
I mean, I actually kind of feel like that would be charming at this point.
Yeah.
Maybe with some weed. I don't know. But I think that if, I just think that even, you know, yes, like you should rely on your producers who have the relationships to be hounding the reps, but also as a director, like be bold. Reach out to that person yourself and say, I'd like to take you to lunch so I can talk to you about my vision. Especially if you're not repped. I mean, it's a great opportunity.
If they're making like $20 million a movie, who pays when the check comes?
It's definitely you, dude. It's definitely you.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
Stone
Bummer.
cold, yeah.
That's why I don't take.
Get all, by the
that's
time,
why I haven't taken Julia Roberts to lunch yet. I'm not gonna pay for that. Should we move into production for a second?
Let's do it. Yeah.
So you got a movie. You're gonna make it. You got some talent. You got some money. How do you determine like how many days you're gonna shoot? And like, can you tell us a little bit about choosing where you're gonna shoot? Because I think that's a giant element in every film that people don't really talk about that much.
I've been lucky enough to shoot all of my movies locally. I think if you can get a tax incentive for your film, amazing, utilize it. But there also is kind of a tiered system of if you are, tier D in Atlanta, you're not going to get the best crew. So sometimes it behooves you to be local and use your team, and you get more bang for your buck here. But as far
you can call in favors too. Right?
Exactly, yeah, and you can also
personal network is valuable.
Yeah, and you can get day players to come in because they're local; they don't have to travel. You can get better cast; they're around, so that can be really helpful. But yeah, as far as budgeting and scheduling, I've made all my films for very small amount of time. I think the first one was 15 days. The next one's 18, and like 22. So you can kind of reverse engineer it to be really economical.
And a ghost story, I think I counted there's like 12 shots in that movie. So probably took like, a week to shoot?
No, it was longer than a week. Lots of different takes. But I think the thing is that you've got to think about that the location is a character a lot of times in and of itself. So where you shoot, you're thinking like economically, like if there's a tax incentive, what connections you have. Lots of other cities are interested in having films come there. So then like how open are they and how helpful are they to offer resources? But it's also like where's the movie set? That's, and I'm like, again, from my mindset, having filmed a lot in Texas, there's a need for regional storytelling. There's a need for stories that come from different places, not just like the main cities. And so, I'm definitely like compelled to tell stories that are in different locations.
Right. So green screen is what you're saying.
Let's talk a little bit about actually, because I think that you three are so passionate and so creatively oriented, but you still sometimes have to be the bad guy, right? Like no matter how much you believe in.
No, you let the line producer be the bad guy.
Oh, there you go. So
yeah,
that's great.
That's
Perfect.
yeah.
Well, there we go. We're done. Is that seriously your move though?
Oh God, no.
Tell us about like when you have to make the hard call.
There's a little bit of that.
I mean, sometimes they're my scapegoat, but no, most of the time, honestly. Look, we're all trying to get the movie made, right? And that is going to mean compromise. It's part of the game. You have a vision, and it's tweaked for 1,000 reasons. The people you bring on, your actors, like it's never exactly as you envisioned it, right? And hopefully it's better. Hopefully it's more than you thought you could ever pull off, right? But yeah, it sucks to have that conversation where you're like, yeah, that 22 days you thought you were going to have. It's going to probably be 18. And we're talking like 3 6-day weeks. Sorry, enjoy your Sundays, I think it's just as long as everyone's communicating about where like be transparent. Like I've never not included a writer-director in the financing process. Like don't, and this is another piece of advice, like don't get into production when you don't have the script ready, and don't do it before you have all the money.
Yes.
Like don't think it's going to like show up. Like
wait,
the
do
worst.
you need all the post money too, or?
No, look, I've done plenty of movies where it's like get to the first cut and then go out for another round of financing. Yeah. Of course, like totally support that, but don't put yourself in a position where you're stressed about the money. Yes. And because it takes you away from the actual act of making the movie. Correct. And the movie suffers.
Yes.
People
true.
feel it. Even
So
if you're like
true.
a great, even if you're really good about protecting everyone, it just starts to find it bubbles to the surface, and then the cast and the crew don't feel comfortable. I mean, I really am only talking about one movie that I worked on, and luckily, like, I was by the director the whole time, and the other producers were chasing the money, but it still sucked that, like, come Thursday morning, we're like, hope the checks don't bounce. Like, that's not fun, and it's not cool, and it's not fair to everyone who's, carved out this time in their lives to be there for you and your journey. And, at the bare minimum, you have to pay them.
And like you said about communication, it's like if you're doing a good job as a producer, you're explaining things. So it's kind of like, okay, these are the choices. Like, you want this would be great, but if we do that, that means this. So what is going to best serve the film? And you kind of go through it. So it's not like a bad guy, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to make the best film. Sometimes you might disagree on what is the best thing, and then that just takes a little bit more communication to figure out what is really, like, you're still trying to get their vision, but be able to do it with the resource and means and finances that you have available.
I think it's about coming to the table with solutions, right? Like, anytime there's a problem, like, we've all lost locations, and sometimes like and the day before, which is a super fun fire to put out. But I think when that happens, it's not about like ringing the alarm and be like, oh shit, everybody, like, we've got to like go back to the drawing board. No, it's like, we're gonna offline, the handful of adults are gonna hide and talk about it and come and present options, so that there are three potential scenarios, and they just, there's just so much happening. It's like the days are so crazy. Like, the last thing you want to do, especially if you're in the middle of production and haven't even begun yet, is add to that pile that, there's so many decisions you have to make all day long. And so I think as like a good producer, you just have to come to the table and say, like, look, I know you loved that school. We did too. They pulled some shady shit at the end. Here's what we're going to do. Like, pick one of these options. And yeah, there's
blame the school.
Often people behave differently to that kind of information. But in the end, much like casting, I know this sounds crazy, and maybe I just sound like I'm into some woo-woo shit, and that's just not even who I am at all. But I think it's like, it ends up being the best thing for every
does.
problem.
It's so crazy. It's so crazy. It's so true.
Everything ends up being perfect.
Yeah,
and it's
it really
beast
does
to get through, but it's exactly
because
as
a lot
it
of
should
times
be.
too, when you're kind of somewhat feeling like you're pushed in a corner, you end up coming up with the solution that's creative that you never would have thought of, and it's so much better. It's like those crazy moments, just like when they say, like with acting, it's like the mistakes actors make in the moment. A lot of times that's what ends up being in the film, because it's so real and so authentic, and it's so good. That's the same thing, I think, with just the overall filmmaking process.
What's the phrase? Creativity is born from constraints. It's like you kind of need something to push against, and that kind of fuels you.
You know what doesn't help creativity is when the producer's like, we just trust in your vision, just do whatever. But
yeah, I don't think that's a very good producer.
Yeah.
I think, as a director too, the constraints, I'm like, oh, we have this location, and so now I can only film here because there's a staircase here and the light's coming from here, so I got to put the camera here. But when someone's like, just do whatever you want, you can do anything, any location, then I'm like, I don't know how to direct.
You're hired.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But locations are a big thing, and like
They are.
one of the main lessons that I've learned is like, you go get permission from a location, you can even get like some agreement signed, but you're sometimes finding locations way in advance of shooting. Cut forward a couple weeks, and they're like, what are you talking about? Oh no, we have an event that night. I'm like, what? Like, I will literally like continue calling and be like, okay, just checking in. Like, even if you have the permission, you got the agreement, you still are just finessing it. That's just one tiny little random piece of information that I learned along the way of like locations, because they're so huge. You have to work that relationship.
A thing that I feel like I'm hearing also that I love so much is that these skills that you get when you start out early on, like the problems maybe change, but the ways that you solve them kind of stay the same, right? Like coming up with 3 different solutions and then presenting that, and like being ready with options, hustling really hard, all of that stuff, just no matter what level you're at, that kind of continues to be the name of the game.
And sometimes your last minute solutions, I find, are way better. Because if you're like, hey, I want to book your nightclub 6 months from now, people are like, okay, I don't think so. But if it's like, hey, is your nightclub available tomorrow night? Because we just lost our place today. They're like, actually, yeah, it is. You can come in. $5,000 that we wouldn't have, or $500, whatever. 50,000.
That also brings me to a really important thing, I think, and we were talking about this kind of before, but if you're making a movie, you kind of have to set a date, even if things aren't completely perfectly ready. You have to say, we are starting principal photography November 1st, 2019, and you get your crew together, and it's gonna push a week or two or a month, always, but you have to set something and start going towards that. Like,
because if not, it's not going to. It's just going to be an open-ended, like, we're going to make a movie, we're going to make a movie.
So the opposite of Mary Pat's advice of having everything.
I think they were talking about having money in the bank and doing this, though.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like an in-between thing, because it's
has
like
different
one of those things
styles.
where you don't necessarily have the money, but you're already like putting down, like, I'm going to make a movie around this point, so that your goal, you have a specific goal.
You have a deadline.
As a deadline. But if as you're approaching that deadline, you don't have the financing, no, don't keep going for, like you said, you're going to push. But
you don't want to ever be like the producer who's crying wolf to like the agents either, though, too, right? Like, I mean, there's this fine line between like throwing a dart at a bull, it's just like at a calendar and be like, now we're, but because I definitely think indie film, especially within like the top agencies' walls, are like, it's a bad word, right? Like, they don't. The first question always when you go to talent, if you're going that route, and I always go at least that route. I mean, I try every avenue, but I always include the reps just because it's just better business practices that they know what's being sent to their actors, and I think it's always fun to be like, we got this to your super fancy client, and we're just letting you know, because then they're like, oh, I guess I have to read it, but I think
I'm accountable.
Exactly. I think it's just that you want to make sure that because the first question is like, is it financed, right?
And I think the difference is, we're using the word independent film, and so obviously that means anything that the studio isn't making. But in my brain, I'm trying to speak from a place of people who are trying to make their first project. That's different than using like recognizable names or working with bigger agents. That's still an independent film. But like my thing of like saying set a date, that could be for your short film that's $5,000, or your feature, your first feature that you're like making super low budget with friends. That's where I'm saying like try to set the date and have a goal, because if not, years are going to pass and you're still like, I'm going to make my first film. But I agree, if you're now working with Hollywood level agents and talent and whatever, you have to really be solid, like, because that's not good.
We should just one final question about production before we move on. Another lightning round. Let's see if this works.
We're clearly not good at that.
Can you think of one thing? It doesn't have to be amazing, but just one unique way that you saved a ton of money on one of your past projects.
I've shot all over my neighborhood. What I have found is when you need expensive locations that you can't afford, it's really good to have made friends with the people that own them. Like places I haunt, going in and playing like we're dirt poor, can we just come in on your one night close?
So you mean like restaurants and bars and like neighbors?
Using your neighborhood and like forcing the community to support you.
Oh, you see me in here all the time. That's great. Yeah, I love that.
I have a couple of things. I don't necessarily recommend this, but I've post-souped most of my features. It's a lot, but it's you save a big chunk, and when you're in production, that is the line item that can go. And the other thing I'll say is, I can't stress this highly enough, but the cheapest way or the easiest way to save money is on the front end. Table read your script, get your friends together, cut all the scenes that are going to be on the cutting room floor that you spent multiple days filming. Just keep it really tight and get it ready to go on the front end, because that is the time when you can, you're not spending an arm and a leg. Yeah.
It's so true. All the stuff that you do in prep is what will ultimately save you a lot of money, because it saves you time. But one specific thing that I've done on my films is have like an intern or a PA that will reach out, and we'll have like a database to get free food, both craft service and meals, like catering, food. And it's amazing when you're saying, hey, it's an independent film, this is what we're doing, how many people really do want to help, both like in numerous kinds of donations, but again, specifically with like catering, craft service, all that stuff, we've had like films be covered completely for that.
And do you like tweet about them, or is there any
Of
sort
course.
of in-kind sort of
we'll,
trade out?
Yeah, we'll definitely do that.
And I imagine this works a lot better in Texas than in Los Angeles.
Probably. although these companies, a lot of the companies are not just Texas-based food companies, you know.
Right.
But you will be surprised because from also a product placement standpoint, you'll be surprised how many people are excited about the industry, and you can reach out to them and say, hey, we're making this really cool project, and then they can come by set or whatever, and you can get a lot just from including people and spreading the word, and they want to have a little bit of that, film on their roster.
Right. Well, cool. So this is a very open-ended questions, but how you've made your movie, it's done. It's pretty decent. How important are film festivals?
Do pickups.
Yeah.
That's actually genuinely good advice. Like, if you don't feel great about your movie, make it better, basically.
Absolutely. And a lot of, it's good to schedule in your budget money for pickups because you're going to need them.
100%.
And pickups, you mean reshoots, same thing, right?
Yeah, additional photography, or I would even say stock footage is another little saving grace.
Cool. And so, so how you didn't get into Sundance or Toronto? Should you quit filmmaking?
Mary Pat's nodding yes.
No, of course not. I mean, you can definitely sell movies outside of festivals, but the truth of the matter is, in terms of getting eyeballs, it's really helpful to premiere at a prestigious film festival. It just is, and there's tons of press there. Everyone's clamoring to find the next new voice. There's a lot of excitement that surrounds it, and quite frankly, the deals that you make in a fest are far better than what you would make in a outside of festival distribution screening. I think it's just the sad reality. Having said that, I think a good movie finds its audience. So, I've never been on social media. I don't have Facebook. I don't have Instagram. I'm real old school and private. And I'm not good at this, but I've seen a number of people just promote the living shit out of their movies, and that helps it get wings. And even I've had friends that have self-distributed and made a bunch of money on download. So I think that there's always a way to find an audience if the story is compelling enough. I mean, if it's just okay, as you described.
I said decent.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think. Are
you guys wanting to rent a decent movie?
Yeah.
I don't think got so. Julia Roberts' assistant in it.
But if you have a decent movie,
she's an actress too.
Then maybe the goal is your next one's going to be better. And I think going to film festivals is so good about making friendships and collaborations and learning from other filmmakers. It goes back to the relationships and planting seeds. It's hopefully you're going to grow as an artist and get better. Most people's first film, whether it's a short or feature, isn't the best thing in the world. If the idea is that you are a filmmaker, storyteller, and this is your life and you're an artist and this is your journey, then that's part of the process. And I feel like I've seen so many filmmakers play the festival circuit, whether they premiered at a big festival or not. Eventually they do, but it's the seeing other films and meeting other people. I think that stuff is invaluable.
I mean, I met one of my closest friends in the world in a shuttle van at I can't even remember. I think we were in Kansas, at a Nothing festival, and so I do think that there's something about
we love you, Kansas. You're a great festival.
What was it?
Said we love you, Kansas.
But what Liz said earlier, I hope that you guys actually take stock in the story about the never going back. I guess because I think I've seen so many features of friends of mine, and I have recommended cutting it down to a short because I think that there would have been a stronger play for their next film if they didn't have such an ego about but I needed to make my first film. It's but it can be a short that does well, and these are $40,000 movies, so it's they're basically shorts anyway, so just fucking cut them. You know what I mean?
Seriously. And after that happened, I learned about so many other successful films that I found out did that same thing. There's no way we would have premiered at Sundance, and no way A24 would have picked us up had we had that original one. First of all, but secondly, it did take the perseverance because we spent a year doing rewrites on the script in order to the script was so much better. And so we went back and did that, and that's why it goes back to the story being so important.
Well, I think Liz answered this for first-time filmmakers, but for you, who've all done a bunch of features at this point, what's more important for you for your next movie? Is it making a profit, or is it kind of making a mark? Like, you know, the accolades, I guess.
I think it's very much, I liken it to the recycling symbol. They're kind of connected. So I think you have to make a profit for investors at a certain point to keep making movies, but not for every film. I think every film has its own place. I've made films that have immediately been in profit before I've even made them, studio films, and that have distribution lined up, that it's not an issue. And I've made films that are completely financed by my company. And I've made films that are, you know, trying to work with better talent and kind of going that route. So there's every version of it. I think it's kind of the collective, what you were saying, it's the career. It's not the one project. It's like
the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. But they're very intrinsically tied too.
Yeah, because you want to be cognitive of, like you're saying, like paying back your investors, trying to have them have a return on investment so you can make future movies. But for me, I always have to feel something, like the story, the script, the filmmaker. One of the most successful films that I've ever made was a kids talking dog movie. But and it's something that I actually was like a creator on. Like they were my dogs. I acted in them.
You have talking dogs?
Yes, they're so smart.
Sorry, that's the worst joke. I apologize.
I wrote the script
Can you
because
name drop this movie? What's this? This sounds amazing.
Oh, yeah, the series of
Air
films
Bud?
are called Adventures of Bailey. And they're with my 2 golden retrievers. And the first one we shot like in an exotic animal, a wildlife ranch. So there's like a baby tiger and kangaroos and I wrote the script because I was like a sucker for dog movies. And then through a horror film that we had made and we're distributing, this distributor was like, I'm starting a new distribution company, a small one, more boutique, and I'm focused on family and kids entertainment, and stuff with dogs does really well. And I was like, oh, I've got a script with a dog in it that I just wrote for fun because I like dog movies. And so I sent it to her, and that's how it turned into. So although it was like, that is like somewhat of like, you know, kids genre, like a commercial kind of thing, it really did stem from like an organic place that I was like, wanted to do it, and they were fun. It's crazy.
That's awesome.
Crazy.
Well, just because we are, should probably wrap things up a little bit soon, I wanted to try one more lightning round.
We're so bad.
Third time's the charm.
Yeah.
We'll do it this time.
Okay, we'll just come up with
what
one-word
is-
answers.
A classic misconception that a first-time filmmaker has. You want to go first?
That your
Jen?
film is unique. This is actually serious. So making films and programming films, and this is the beauty of making films, is that we are all so similar and we're all so connected. And watching a movie, that's why we tell stories, to connect. But your story that is so personal and specific to you, make sure you do your research and see what's out there, because somebody may have made this film and worked with the same distributor that is your dream distributor, and it's already out there and people have seen it. So make sure that you are telling a story that you want to tell and that hasn't been told in that way, or that you're making it your way. Because, yeah, that's just, I think, super important. Be informed.
That's good.
Lightning, go.
I mean, I think I hinted at it earlier, which is just that the process takes time, and don't be disillusioned to think that it's going to happen overnight. If you want instant gratification, direct music videos.
Cool. Lots of money in that.
Yeah, be
dead.
broke. And
And as I stated before, just that failure is not necessarily failure. That's where growth comes from.
Well, cool. I guess, should we? So, I mean, I guess it's kind of a two-part question. One is, what do you think the state of indie film is today, like in a succinct response? And how does that tie into what your next thing is for your own personal career?
2 words, TV.
TV, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
TV.
been nice. Yeah, I mean, I've been out of practice for the last 2 years, honestly, because I've been on 2 seasons of a show and having a baby and all the things. But I think it's a really exciting time for indie films. I mean, from my cheap seats, it seems like there are tons being made, and that should be inspiring and exciting. And at the same time, I imagine that's a little daunting as a first-time filmmaker, because it's like, how do you cut through the noise? And I don't have the solution, but what I will say is that just fucking make a movie, and don't overthink it. I do think do your homework, of course. My God, the worst possible thing that could happen is that you're making a movie that's already been made. But I think you should also trust your voice and know that you're different enough to put your stamp on it. So even if it's a familiar story, you should still lean in. But I think that if you spend time thinking about what the marketplace wants and who's successful, and even just, like meeting with distributors, meeting with networks, and hearing about what they want, like don't let that influence what the story you want to tell. Like if you have a script that you love, make it. Just do it. There's no good.
It takes so long to make movies that by the time your movie,
the cycle could be
Yeah.
It's like 2 to 5 years from now. So, I think it's a really interesting time, and like I said before, I think like good movies find audiences. So just make one.
I'm really excited about independent filmmaking now and in the future. I think we're seeing such unique, beautiful stories from all walks of life, and I feel like you're right. Everyone has their own unique perspective and voice. It's just be bold, break boundaries, be fearless in your own story. And the stuff that I'm working on now, I'm doing one that we're filming on like a Native American reservation. I'm doing another one about a girl in post-revolutionary Tehran. Like these are unique, specific voices. That's exciting to me, and I think there's definitely a place for that.
Yeah, I think it's also just my tongue-in-cheek TV answer, but it is an exciting time for the type of content that's being greenlit. Diversity, and there's just a huge push for personal stories. If you can tap into, that's such a buzzword. I don't know if you guys experience that, but in meetings, it's if you can say this is your story, you're like already, 6 feet ahead of other people because you have all the answers. Because then you're indispensable to the project.
Correct.
And they can't, they're like, what color was the door? Green. You have, all the things of like the story. So that's a huge thing. But yeah, there's just so much kind of originality right now.
Yeah.
Are any of you interested in a Chernobyl-style story about 2 white male podcast hosts?
Whoa.
Takes place in LA.
That sounds amazing.
What if I told you the door was green?
Greenlit.
Greenlit.
Well, awesome. So we have a segment at the end of our show where we ask our guests to recommend things.
Woo!
Good job.
That's fun for the live show, right? A little
people,
audience.
there's a whole cult following for these 2
Yeah,
white
I have no idea what's
male
happening right now.
podcast hosts.
Anyway, your question.
Yeah, so for the live show, we try to be a little more specific. In the regular show, it's just like whatever you're into. But we thought, since you're producers, it would be interesting to find out if let's say you don't have an office and you need to meet someone, a writer, a director, an actor, what's your favorite place in LA to meet someone for a meeting?
I think the douchebag answer is Soho House, because they have an awesome view, and you always run into friends.
Yeah, that's you don't
they
have
need
an
the
office
endorsement,
category.
you know what I mean?
But Rita House is also a good alternative.
I know. I'm happy to have been exposed to it. I think the spot that I find myself at like 2 or 3 times a week right now is 5 Leaves in East Hollywood. It's just got like a super cool design. The food's really good. The service is terrible, but the booths are really cozy.
Cool.
5 Leaves. I haven't heard of that. That's
It's from Brooklyn. Yeah, it's pretty. It's actually really chill. Unfortunately, and forgive me in advance if I offend any of you, but it's like right next door to the Scientology centers. There's like a lot to look at. Can be distracting.
Good people watching.
They are good-looking Scientologists. Jana?
I really like Kings Road. They have really good coffee. It's nice and strong. They don't really bug you that much. There's indoor seating and outdoor seating. It's kind of centrally located.
On King Street.
Yeah, there you go.
Cool. Or
Can't
King
miss
Road?
Road.
Yeah.
Road. Cool. Liz?
I don't really have a place that I would say is like what I'm endorsing, because I've bounced around to so many places, and it's has been more based on like the writer directors that I'm meeting with, that they're like, oh,
so
here,
Starbucks.
they suggest a place. I've done that, but I guess being, because I'm still, my base is still Texas. Like I go back and forth between Texas and Los Angeles, so I'm just constantly still getting recommendations. I will say I did meet a filmmaker recently at the Henry in West Hollywood on Robertson, and I thought that was kind of cool because it had like the restaurant area, then it had a place where you had coffee, and it seemed like a great place from like day to night. Like you could like meet somebody for a meeting and then maybe meet somebody for a drink later. So that was kind of a cool place, but it's not like I go to one place regularly. I'm also like going to lots of people's houses, which in some cases are really nice. Like some of the other people I'm working with, I'm like, let's go to your place.
Rose Cafe is really good for the West Side too. I don't know if I'm allowed to do two.
I had a birthday
No
party
West
there,
Side
March
stuff.
You should have said
Not
that.
on
I
this
would have taken it
podcast.
for you because I didn't have one.
Rose Cafe.
If you listen to the podcast, everyone knows I hang out at the Starbucks Reserve in Los Feliz. I think it's a great place to meet people, but I also like Semi-Tropic. I think I talked about
Oh,
that
I
one.
love Semi-Tropic.
Semi-Tropic.
Those guys are so
And there's
great.
this place, like you said, the food is horrible, the service is questionable, the parking is impossible, but it's called Solar de Cahuenga.
Ooh, tell me more.
On
That's
Cahuenga.
not is that an endorsement? That didn't sound like an endorsement.
It's just kind of central, and there's like a lot of couches, and people, you can sit there for 5 hours and no one will bug you.
Yeah, I'm
That's
always
good.
looking for good, like, in between the East Side and West Side spots, and I don't have any good ones. But I like
Paper or
mini
plastic
bar.
is kinda cool.
Paper or
Yeah,
plastic
paper
is
or
cool.
plastic.
Yeah.
I tell you about my app idea, half and half. It's like you want to have a meeting with someone, you put in their address, your address, the time you want to meet them, and it tells you a coffee
Genius.
shop.
Dude, you should invest
That
in
is.
this.
Yes.
That is a great idea. Well, mine is mini bar. I like mini bar a lot. It's like
Oh, it's so good.
so good, right?
Yeah.
Also very good for celebrity sightings. You see famous people there all the time.
You see him at Solar de Cahuenga too, though.
Yeah, like kind of the
Like B-list.
B-list. Like Kathy Griffith. C-list? Didn't you make a show about the
D-list, dude.
D-list?
It was called
Sorry.
D-list.
Sorry. Well, thank you, everyone. We're going to hang out for a little bit more, so if you want to keep chatting, we really appreciate everyone coming. And thank you so much to our panel. And thank you to Rita House and Aqua Hydrate and Spread the Love. And you should watch all these people's movies and follow them on social media.
Get to know each other. Everyone here has something in common. You all like making films together. So introduce yourself to people. Okay, everyone?
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.